Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Album of the Year. Today we have arrived at 1981. Yes, indeedy, we are into the 80s. Started at 65. We're going to work our way all the way up to 2019. We are at 1981. Got a ways to go, right? We'll probably be doing this into the summer months, all right? Each day tackling a different year in the history of recorded music. Picking one, our absolute favorite of the year, and in my case, I'm also doing a runner-up. Okay, so 81, some really good ones, as always, and I do want to correct a couple of mistakes yesterday. So yesterday, I showed off Rush Permanent Waves and said Hemispheres. Again, I do these very early in the morning, first thing, so I don't think my mind was quite with it yet. I also mentioned Blue Oyster Cult's Fire of Unknown Origin instead of saying Cultosaurus erectus, now that I got that out of the way. All right, so 1981. So again, we've got new wave of British heavy metal, Fast and Furious, all those bands coming out of that scene, starting to release, first and second and third albums, kicking some serious ass. You got a lot of veterans who were putting out some, you could call albums of their career up to that point. You've got new wave and pop making a huge comeback. Disco by this time is already dying off. Okay, you got classic rock still riding high. So all sorts of things happening. Lots of returns, lots of comebacks. The decade, as the decade will start to move on, it's basically, the good chunk of the decade is notable for lots of hard rock and metal. Okay, and as you know, I'm a hard rock and metal fan. I'm going to have a lot of favorites during this decade. So each year is not going to be easy. Today was moderately simple for me, at least my number one pick. My runner-up, not so much. That was a little more difficult, but I think I had a clear-cut winner. So let's go with my main pick. All right, so it was released on February 12th, 1981 on Anthem Records, produced by Terry Brown and the band. I'm talking about Moving Pictures by Rush. Yeah, this is their 8th studio album. 8 Times a Charm, I guess. They had a good amount of success beforehand. You got the first album, Rush, didn't do so well. You got Fly By Night. You got Caress of Steel. You got 2112. All of a sudden, they're starting to, get a lot more exposure. Okay, Farewell to Kings. Hemispheres. Permanent Waves. Permanent Waves was probably to date their biggest seller until this one. This one came out, and again, I was very similar with me as kind of the rest of the planet. It's like there were a lot of people who were into Rush, liked them a lot, but it wasn't until this came out that I think for a lot of people solidified Rush as perhaps a favorite band. And while I think that, you look at certainly 2112, Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, tremendous albums that, you could really get down to the nitty gritty and look at them compared to this one or even Permanent Waves and think, well, I have more favorite songs on some of those albums, but I think from top to bottom, and based on the impact that this had when it came out on me personally, this was a clear-cut winner for 1981. And I usually cite this as like my number one favorite Rush album just because I have so much history with it. And literally, there's great songs on here. Even though a couple of them you've probably heard way too many times. Like Tom Sawyer, fantastic song. All right, there's a reason why it's, so many casual Rush fans cite that as their number one favorite Rush song. A lot of us who have been listening to Rush, way back, probably have heard Tom Sawyer one too many times. Doesn't deny what a great song it is, right? Red Barchetta, genius, great textures to that song. Alex Lifeson, man, it's some of his tastiest soloing and perfectly executed riffs and chord progressions on this album. All right, YYZ or YYZ, however you want to say it. The instrumental abilities of the band. Neil and Geddy and Alex, just an amazing instrumental song. Okay, you got Limelight, a great radio tune, killer guitar solo, so memorable. Okay, The Camera Eye, their little mini epic on the album, very underrated song. All right, Witch Hunt, perhaps my favorite song on the album, dark and menacing, heavy, it's a great song. And then probably the song that when this album came out I liked the least, it wasn't even close, that I now really appreciate a lot. Vital Signs. I mean, it's got this kind of almost kind of like quasi reggae riff, right? But then it gets like dark and proggy and menacing and the haunting, vocals at the end of the track. Just a great song that I've come to love dearly over the years. So for me, this was kind of a no-brainer. Just a perfect album, a landmark album for Rush and for, the hard rock, heavy rock, metal genre itself, prog rock, whatever you want to call it. This was, when you had a lot of progressive rock bands trying to figure out what the hell to do in the 80s with music changing so much, Rush figured it out. And they kept selling records and more of them, right? So, now that we got that out of the way. So it came down to two of them for my runner-up. And I really struggled with this because, there's a lot of great albums released in this year. A lot of great albums released. And from some really, favorites of mine. But it kind of came down to two that I was fighting for. And when it was all said and done, I settled on one of them because I think this album kind of continued a comeback for this artist and band. And for me, it's always been my favorite album from him. And this album featured his young guitar player. And I think by leaps and bounds, it contains my favorite work from this guy, who then left us way, way, way too soon afterwards. I'm talking about Diary of a Madman by Ozzy Osbourne. I think this is Randy's finest hour. It kind of sounds weird to say that because he doesn't have many hours. But I think as much as I love the Blizzard of Oz album, the debut, I think this is just much more enjoyable, much more realized band. I think the songwriting is better. I think Randy's playing is better on here. As much as that debut was great, I just think it all really came together on this album. And honestly, I like a lot of the Ozzy material that's come after this. I honestly think once the 90s hit, I found a lot lacking in Ozzy's studio albums. And I think even like the Jakey Lee stuff, while it has lots of great moments, I honestly don't think Ozzy and whatever band he had ever kind of reached the heights of this. I think for me, this is the pinnacle of Ozzy Osbourne's solo career. I don't think it'll ever be equaled. For me, this is if it wasn't for the Rush, this probably would have been my number one for the year. And again, you got some great stuff. You got Van Halen put out a killer album this year. Blue Oyster Cult was my number 3 pick. You got Journey and Riot and, a lot of really, really great albums. I get too long to mention. But for 1981, Moving Pictures, my number one, my runner-up, Diary of a Madman. List yours in the comments below. We want to hear your favorite, your top 5, your top 10, whatever you want to do from 1981. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. We all love these albums differently, hear them differently, right? They all came to us at different points in our lives. So we're all going to have our special ones. So that's the joy of music. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned. Top 10 songs from Riot coming at you next. You don't want to miss it. Take care. Bye-bye.